The Hawaiians are paying attention. Hawaiians of all colors, like myself. I'm not Maoli. I'm not Kanaka Maoli, but I am a Hawaiian, and I have friends who are Hawaiian of all colors and Americans, right? And the Americans want remedy too, because they're trying hard to restore their constitutional republic, and they have a right to do that. So I know there's a bit of controversy in the fact that we are a real people's court on this island. We call ourselves Hawaii Natural Law Assembly, and we operate in the only law on earth, and that's the Creator, God, Teokua, Elohim, Jehovah, universal source. You call it what you want. I'm not here to judge you on that. All I know is that I wake up every morning through grace. My eyes open because some power in the universe allows me to open my eyes this morning, just like everybody else. The next breath I take, I can assimilate it because of God's grace. Amen. Us being here today, we are brought together because of God's grace. And so I want to thank each and every one of you, because we're all brothers and sisters. You know, we're all Na'ohana in the Most High. We have different kuleana. We have different rights and responsibilities. Well, the rights are all the same, but we have different responsibility in our lives. And so all of your particular kuleana, particularly for you guys, since you are election observers, we're coming to each other's aid. Specifically for what? To make sure that God's natural law is followed. Because America in 1776 is founded on God's natural law. Hawaii is founded on God's natural law. Declaration of Rights, 1839. I think this is important because there's what I just mentioned, that the foundation of law for both political venues is the same Creator. Once again, be truthful, do no harm, and honor your word. So we're unified in God's law, the Hawaiians and the Americans. So that is the basis of lawful adjudication that Hawaii Natural Law Assembly was put together. And I'll write that down, because you can take this and apply it to every controversy on earth. Okay? One, right? Be truthful. Now, what I'm writing here is the basis of why we can adjudicate, and we must adjudicate in the law. Be truthful, or what is the truth? Okay, number 2, this is what you tell your 5-year-old. Do no harm. Was any harm done? I think so. We are alleging serious harm to society, to our keiki, to the aina. It all ties together. And the last one, number 3, honor your word. Honor your word. What does that also mean? That means what is the status of contracts, agreements, and treaties? Hawaii suffers from breach of contract on so many levels, individually and nation to nation. This kind of crime, this kind of organized corporate mafia crime is going on across the planet. Hawaii has its own unique history, and Hawaii has its own unique pathway to pono, to remedy. And God gave us, the Most High gave us this opportunity to come together, Hawaiians and Americans, to adjudicate lawfully and arrive. What are we doing? We're going to arrive at a lawful conclusion. Okay? We're going to arrive at a lawful conclusion. And what anybody on earth wants to do with the lawful conclusion is up to them, as long as they do no harm. And on this soil, we know on this soil, God's law was sanctified. Declaration of Rights, 1839. This is God's law. Declaration of Rights, 1839, Kawikiaole. That is Kamehameha 3. Okay? For the Americans, Declaration of Independence. And that is 1776. Unity in the law is confirmed. It doesn't matter who you are on this soil, particularly for Americans and Hawaiians, because that's really the main two countries that are having to ho'oponopono. We got to make this right.
Gotta make it work.
We got to make it work. Now, America, 22 years before they kidnapped our queen, America established the District of Columbia. And with no authority in the organic constitution, the original constitution of 1789, an American Congress allowed a federal corporation to happen called the District of Columbia. 22 years later, that corporation occupied Hawaii, arrested our queen. And so we've been waiting 129 years for this very moment when Americans and Hawaiians united in the law can arrive at a lawful conclusion because a controversy exists. So, the controversy exists because people who were called in to examine the legitimacy of the election, they observed, to my knowledge, what I heard is 10 people. Maybe there's more. Elaine said there's a whole bunch of people complaining on all islands that these people have observed what looks like election fraud, or at least irregularities that require questions. And so your people ask questions, particularly, and I'll turn it over to you, Austin, because Austin asked some questions that are right to the heart. Right to the heart of, is this legitimate or not? And what was the response of the authorities? The authorities shut him down. They did not answer his question. They responded by firing him basically on the spot and calling the police. So if that's not a cover-up, if that's not a red flag that we must investigate in a lawful manner, and we're going to show you how we'll do it in a lawful manner and unite all the people in Hawaii and people in America, well, they'll get word of this, because everybody is got unalienable rights. Everyone is born with those rights. We're taking those rights and putting it into lawful action. So this is Austin Martin, and if you know, he is the whistleblower that came out and spoke so wonderfully. Truth to power. There you go, my brother.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Aloha, I'm Austin. Thank you, Gene, for the introduction.
Yes, sir.
I haven't really planned anything to say. I wanted it to be just spontaneous. I wrote an affidavit, which I can send you all a copy of, but I'd rather just, if it's okay, tell you in my own words what I saw, what happened, and then afterward I'll give a couple conclusions that I have about that, to kind of separate what I think versus what I saw. I didn't seek this position out. I actually ended up, I called Governor Ige a Nazi in Walmart last year and ended up with criminal charges for that, and that one thing led to another. I called the Libertarian Party to complain, where are you guys? And they ended up making me the Big Island chair and putting me on their state executive committee. And I won't go into my opinions about the status of that party. But I drew the short straw for observer duty. There wasn't a whole lot of interest in the party of observing the election. But I thought, you know what, that's something we need and somebody's got to do it. So I went ahead and volunteered, and they voted on it and put me forward to the Office of Elections. So that's how I became an observer. Going to training, I try to take everything with a grain of salt, and I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt to the best of my ability. So I'm trying to go in there with no assumptions. And right off the bat, there's issues. These heart intercivic people and who are operating the voting machines, and they're the technicians who actually count, if you will, the vote. They were giving really inconsistent statements. I read some things online, just in situ even, that seemed to go directly against what I was hearing from these employees and the Office of Elections too. And so that made me really concerned. After that first training, when was that? Back in June, I believe, right? After that first training meeting, I contacted the State Ethics Commission and the district attorneys, and I made a report. And the State Ethics Commission made an official referral over to the state attorneys to investigate Heart Intercivic for potential fraud. Because what I saw was basically them making material misrepresentations of fact for personal or financial gain. And that is the statutory definition of fraud. Go right ahead.
Austin, you mean this happened, you did this referral after the training? Wow. So they knew you.
They probably knew that I'd already gotten them in some trouble, and that might have contributed to their bad attitudes. I'm not sure.
So when you walked in that morning, they knew you?
I'm not certain. So this was
Okay.
after the training. I made the referral, and I wrote some emails and tried to document what I saw, because I was extremely concerned about being told on the one hand that the internet connectivity was a big one, right? Are they or are they not connected to the internet? There should be a straight answer. If it's connected and that's certified, that's fine, just say so, right? But instead we got this runaround about, no, it's for media pre-results, and oh no, we transmit the results with V drives and over the phone, and then it changed to a transmitter with a wireless modem. So it would have been fine if they just answered the question, but instead they did this big runaround. So, and I felt like it was a runaround where we had several conflicting answers that could not all possibly be true, right? So, and this is people on the official company dime representing government contractors taking money from we the people and then lying to us about it on nothing less than our elections. So I was concerned, and that's what prompted me to make the first complaint. I don't have a lot of faith that the current apparatus in the state, even if there's really good people in the attorney's office, their bosses are going to be putting the hurt on them to make them drop this investigation. So I don't have a lot of hope of this actually going anywhere, but it's the proper course, right? And so I want to try to do everything above board. Going back subsequently to test the equipment, I missed one of the appointments because I got sick, so I didn't want to get anybody else sick, so I stayed home. But on the next one, we were testing the equipment ahead of the primary, and I was actually not allowed to test the equipment. I wasn't allowed to even hardly look at it. I had a stack of ballots that I was supposed to put through that was like a test election for a district, and they didn't let me do that. They stalled out the entire time and made sure. I wasn't the only observer who had that problem too. They also had equipment problems. So what I got to observe was they made on-the-fly modifications to the system that I believe actually void the federal certification for election use. If these machines are ever, at any point in time, connected to the broad internet, they're decertified. This is my understanding. They're not allowed to be used again after that because they've basically been exposed to a permanent risk that could not only jeopardize this election cycle, but every future election cycle where that piece of equipment is being used. If I'm not mistaken, that's actually part of the federal certification. So I got to witness Mr. Frankie Suarez, a Heart Inter-Civic spokesperson, plug in a LAN cord into what looked like a regular modem like you'd use in your home, and then stick that into the official election transmitter, right, to actually right? So I asked about this, and I was concerned, and another observer had pointed out that there should be a server room. If it connects to the wall, then there's a server room in the back. And sure enough, there's a ceiling panel halfway between the server room and the thing that was slightly removed, and you could see blue data cables going. So it was like somebody had worked on it recently. There's evidence of that. Eventually, some of the employees tried to kind of sneak off towards the back after the observer who asked about the server room left. At that point, me and a couple of other observers noticed they're kind of surreptitious. I mean, they were sneaking, like straight up. We were like, we should follow them. And we did. And sure enough, these doors are unlocked. The server room is unsecured. There is a server room. The equipment there is not listed. We have no idea what it is. Now, the state attorneys might know. They might have a list of equipment, but they're not telling anybody in the state of Hawaii what is and isn't supposed to be there, right? So the Hart people were extremely defensive about this. They didn't want me looking at it. They didn't want me asking questions about it. And here's the real kick in the teeth for them. I don't have extensive experience, but I worked for a short time for a tech company doing server cutovers on companies like Walmart. So an old Walgreens is like an environment that I've worked in before plenty of times, so I kind of am familiar with what should and shouldn't be there. I was not familiar with some of the equipment. There could have easily been some device to transmit the election results off-site. We don't know, and there's no way to find out unless we get real investigative power on this. So, I mean, I witnessed a lot of irregularities. I manually transcribed the contents of a printout from the transmitter that showed that it was connected to an Ethernet cable, right? And they physically got in front of me and blocked me with their bodies to prevent me from being able to read or copy the contents of that printout, right? They like got in front of me, acted like I was being aggressive and belligerent by simply asking these questions. Go ahead.
That blocking, is this at the test event, or where was this?
This was at the test, so if the transmitter device was right here, there would be a printout on the right-hand side of the machine. The employee came over from this side and went like this and was like, I can't let you know, and just started putting papers over it so I couldn't see it. I was able to complete it anyway.
You were written. And it looked like a credit card machine and how the paper kind of rolls a little. So I was there, I saw this too, and Austin was trying to write it down because we weren't allowed to have our phones or electronic devices there. So he was trying to transcribe it, and she literally covered with her hand just so he couldn't see. So that made us more suspicious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you ladies introduce yourself,
Yeah.
please?
Oh,
Because, yeah.
I'm Winnie Morikami. I was an official observer at the Count Center.
I'm Marie Rulin. I was designated ballot opener at the county center.
Much love, you guys. Thank you for being
coming
here.
tonight.
Yes.
Thank you. So I won't bog you down with every last detail. In the affidavit, there's a good number of them listed out. If I were to like go up in front of a court, I could answer questions about this, and I could dialogue and just say what I saw, right? And at this point, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just a witness, right? I saw something that I know didn't seem right. It probably would have been okay if they just answered the questions, you know? Like, if they'd just been like, I might not like the answers, but, you know, this is not just not answering. At the point when we were in the server room, I started really like trying to get equipment numbers and everything so I could go look them up, right? See what's there. And Frankie, that same employee, also blocked me with his body from being able to see the equipment and started raising his voice. Get him out of here! Get him out of here! Ordering the Office of Elections to remove me. Well, he denied that any of that equipment belonged to Hart Intercivic. I don't know why he was so interested in blocking me from seeing it. But it's interesting, they denied that it was theirs, and yet kind of implied ownership of it. Whose server is that? Right? And we could not get a straight answer. They wouldn't tell us if it was the Office of Elections property or Hart Intercivic. Should be a simple question.
Went to China.
Right? At that point, Frankie got in my face this far from me and was physically threatening and intimidating me, right? Like literally trying to bounce me out of the room. And I realized, I honestly thought he was going to hit me, and I realized that like if I didn't like start taking, like it was a bad situation. I was kind of outnumbered in a very confined space, and you know, like if I do anything, like if I try to exercise a right of self-defense, it's going to go poorly for me. These are government people, you know, like no. So I start backing away. Under my breath, I mutter at Frankie. I'm like, get away from me. I used a preferable explicit. It's so quiet though, I didn't even think he could hear me. And he's like, what did you say to me? And I repeated myself. I looked him right in the eye and I was like, don't you do this to me, right? He goes off and starts crying and saying that he doesn't know what people are capable of today and that he felt threatened. And so and then I guess he was working with County Clerk John Henricks. I'm not sure Henricks' level of involvement. I don't know what he told Henricks, so I don't want to speculate as to like someone's culpability, but John Henricks and Frankie worked together to have me removed. And so they invited the police to come and escort me and were trying to characterize me as a criminal. Thankfully, there were observers on site who were willing to speak up and say, hey, we saw everything. That's not what happened, right? And the police, they were like, okay, you guys all just need to sleep on it. Why don't you guys calm down? Talking to the county workers, right? So it was interesting. When I asked, so before I could leave the parking lot, I got an email from Scott Naga, and it says, you're fired. Right? No explanation, none. He cites the statute giving him the authority to appoint observers, says nothing about removing them, nothing says he can do it without cause. In fact, it seems to imply the opposite, right? So I'm not surprised he didn't give any reason. But anyway, I don't know what he's been told. So I don't know how many of y'all have seen the video, but
Yes,
on
the video.
I tried to go and ask him, like, hey, you know, like, surely you have not heard what happened, otherwise you would not have ordered this, right? Because I mean, gotta give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know him, right? Like, maybe these guys told him that I did something outrageous. So I just want to speak with him. And but it seems like there was definitely intention. Like, this was not an accident. Okay. This is mostly like what I witnessed and what I got to see. There's more than I could possibly concisely describe. Let's move on really quickly. I want to give you some simple conclusions. If we have a culture of corruption that is so tolerant of this, if this can exist in the office of election,
That's
right, this year, in this form, there is no way this is a new batch. This is not a new operation. This is something that's clearly, obviously been going on. I can tell that as an observer who got to see this, and as someone who's familiar with some of the factual and procedural history of past complaints. This, in my opinion, no, not in my opinion, if the Office of Elections is not just broken, but intentionally covering up criminal activity on part of a vendor, then there is a necessary, inescapable conclusion. There are going to be compromised members of all three branches of government that the Office of Elections has contributed to putting them in power.
Absolutely. Yep.
That is an inescapable, necessary conclusion. If they've only ever done this one time, then that conclusion is valid. It has to be assumed for the state of state security. That is a fact. And what we call that in legal terms is a sophisticated, color of law, racketeering organization.
What's your other observation?
That is the primary one. My other observations is that there was clearly intent and the parties were clearly working in collusion.
Yes.
They were working together to maintain a criminal racketeering operation. These conclusions, I know, were probably mostly, you know, we can all see it. Most people can. But in a court of law and as a fact finder, we have to be very judicious with what we say and what we believe. So if I'm going to come out and say these people are engaged in a criminal act, I need to know what I'm saying, and we need to know what we're saying on that. There's elements that have to be satisfied for that. I believe this satisfies every element of racketeering and is a violation of United States Code Title 42, Section 1983, deprivation of rights under color of law. I also believe that this is an act of extrinsic fraud.